right. All right, so let's take a look at being able to update data. So up to this point, we've taken a look at being able to read data from a remote web service, and most web services, that's the extent of what they would allow you to do, right? If you go to Yelp or Yumly or Google or Best Buy or Amazon, most of their APIs are going to be read-only, right? So they're exposing their data. You can search it, query it, you can aggregate it in any which way, but very seldom will they allow you to provide data, to post data, right, or modify their data. They're the owners of the data. In most of the cases, they're the single source of truth for that data, right? But if you're manipulating your own data, then certainly you can allow to do this, right? So let's look at the first type of update. We would like to maybe add a brand new instance of a piece of data. Right. So to do that, according to the naming conventions that we're following, this would be using a post, right? And then we would be passing as an argument an object that would represent the new data that we want to insert. Okay. All right, so let's do that. Let's copy from here, and maybe let's start up here. So we want to be able to create a user, and ideally you would pass in a user instance. Somehow we would insert it into a database, right? And then once it's inserted in a database, the auto increment would calculate what its primary key is, and we would be able to return to whoever invoked this the actual object that was inserted, including also the primary key and any other default values for any of the other fields. Okay, we would want to expose this following the RESTful standards, where there would be a post mapping, right? So only when we do an HTTP post would this be invoked, and perhaps map it to the name of the entity that we are manipulating. In this case, just a user. Make sense? So there it is. So let's import the post mapping from the Spring framework, and also, where do we get the instance that we want to insert? Well, typically it would be passed in through an HTTP request from some client, somebody who's generating a post to us, and typically the data will be encoded as part of the HTTP body, right? I typically either as XML or as JSON or as any number of formats, right? The default format that JAX-RS expects is that it'll be formatted as JSON. That's the default encoding, but you can change that encoding to be anything other than JSON, right? But by default, it'll use the JSON MIME type, right? So if you're using the JSON MIME type, you don't have to do anything. If not, then you can configure other formats and other MIME types that you want to use. So typically it'll be part of the HTTP body, right, in the request that comes in through the HTTP request, right? So we're going to have to parse it from the body of the HTTP request, and then instantiate an instance of user based on whatever JSON object comes from the client. So ideally, this would be mapped from the request body, right? Ideally formatted in a JSON format. Ideally, the property names of the JSON object will map one-to-one with the names of the properties of this Java class. If they don't, we can map it. We can say, oh, this fn in JSON maps to this first name in Java, right? We can map that. We can configure that. But by default, right, the mapping is one-to-one, right? First name maps to first name, username maps to username, and whatnot. That's the default behavior. Okay. So if we have that, this will automatically parse the JSON, map it one-to-one with the fields, instantiate it, and provide it to us as an instance of the user class. And then we would need to actually insert it into a database. So to insert in the database, we're going to use, as just like we've done up to this point, we use the user repository to interact with the database. So user repository, and then we can do a save. So there is no insert. Instead, there is a save. Save works for both insert and update. All right? For update, it's a little trickier, but for insert, it's just save, right? And then the instance of the object that you want to insert. Okay? So in this case, it's user. And once it's inserted into a database, this save, notice that it returns a user object. See that? It returns of the same data type, right? So we can just return it. We can return it, and it will be an instance that is now mapped to a database, right? It'll have the primary key and any other default values that we might have. Okay, so let's try that. So if we start the server, now we have something that can expect a user instance. Now, up to this point, we've been using the browser to interact with our API. Okay, and that's easy when you are doing a read-only operation, right? When you're doing a get, because that's exactly what browsers do. Browsers, if you inspect what's happening in the network, when you refresh, notice that these queries are indeed. Let's put this on the right-hand side. These queries are indeed just get requests, right? We haven't explicitly generating a get, but that's what browsers do, right? Browsers, the only thing that a browser can do is either a get, if you type it here at the search bar or the input field, or also, if you have an HTML and you're referencing an image or a JavaScript or a CSS. Those are all gets. It's reading from the network. The other thing that a browser can do from scratch is generate a post. Right? If you create a form and folks fill out a form and submit the form, it can generate a post to wherever you want it to go. Right? Those are the only two things that a browser can do. Instead, to generate a post programmatically, we would need JavaScript to do that. All right? Let's not get into JavaScript just yet. Instead, let's use a tool such as Postman or any of your favorite tools that allows you to generate HTTP requests. So this is CS5200. CS5200, save. So we'd like to be able to generate a post request. So this one allows you to generate all sorts of HTTP requests, posts, deletes, copies, head, options, it's all of them. So let's do a post. Where do we want to go? We want to post to HTTP. So this same URL we've been using all along, right? So let's copy that. There it is. We want to post here, all right? And we want to send. Make sure that the content type that is being sent over is configured to be an application JSON. Right? Also, in the body of the HTTP request, I would like to provide a URL. I'm sorry, the JSON object that we're going to be passing around. So it's going to start with curly brackets, and I got to make sure that the properties that I use here are exactly the same, spelled literally the way they are configured in the Java class. So here we'll have a username. We have Dan, we have Bob. Let's do Charlie. We'll have a password. And this maybe Brown. And then we have maybe first name. Now this has to be properly formatted as a true JSON object. So all properties need to be double quoted, right? All string values need to be double quoted. So no shortcuts here. Okay. All right, so we did that. Let's first check our database, see what's there. Let's refresh. We still have just Alice, Bob, Chuck, and Dan. So let's post this. Let's send this post. Notice what came back from the server. From the server, we got back the same object we sent, but notice with the added ID number 5. Right? If we go back to our database and refresh, notice that we've added Charlie Brown in there. Okay, so that .save was able to insert that content into the database, and we can see the insert right here. See that? We have, these are the two queries that were used earlier. We can see the select to retrieve all the users. Oh no, this was retrieved by the username, right? Retrieved by Alice A. Wonder, and then here's the insert that was used to insert Charlie Brown. This is the prepared statement that was used to insert it, right? With the first name, last name, password, and all the placeholders. Okay, see that? All right, let's move on.